Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for part 24 of the record collection tour. In this video, we are going to finish out the remainder of the S's. Still, again, a couple of pretty major artists for me personally that we have yet to cover, but we're near the end. We're really getting there. Just a couple more videos to go, I think. And yeah, let's get right on into it. Now we're going to start with an artist that I have not explored a whole lot of, but I do want to get into them a little bit more because I've liked the couple of records that I've heard. This is Steel Eye Span, Hark the Village Wait. I like the aesthetic of Steel Eye Span in general. As I said, I've only heard like the first couple of records or so? I've only heard like one or two albums of theirs, and I think they were earlier ones. But yeah, just the kind of very traditionalist folk type of sound that they lean into. I know some people say it's a little bit much for them, and I can understand that. You like what you like, but I personally am a pretty big, I enjoy their sound quite a bit, and I've not done a proper deep dive on them, but I would like to at some point. It has been a little while since I've heard any of their records. We then get into a fun one to talk about, Steely Dan. My Steely Dan collection is not complete by any means. I only have a few of their records, but I have a lot of my favorites. In fact, I think it might be my 3 favorites that I own. I haven't done a ranking in a while. So, to start off, we have Can't Buy a Thrill, the debut record. This is it's kind of an odd duck in the Steely Dan catalog, right? Just in the sense of it is the most band-like that they've ever sounded. It is not entirely the Fagen and Becker show. You have all these other names like, Jeff Baxter was with them at the time, Denny Diaz, David Palmer singing the backing vocals on most of the songs, lead vocals on a few. Palmer, I think, is kind of a bit divisive. I think some people are really big fans of him. Some people are not. I think people who are very attuned to Fagen being like the sound of Steely Dan are probably not super open-minded to Palmer. I think Palmer's fine. I think he's fine. But yeah, Do It Again, the opening track. It might be my favorite Steely Dan song. It's up there, which is kind of unfortunate, but in the sense that it they start with maybe their best song, but goddamn, it's good. I mean, any band would kill to have that as their best track. I like Dirty Work, Reelin' in the Years, and stuff like that as well. It's a cool sound, but and I like Countdown to Ecstasy too, which I don't own on vinyl. But once we get into this one, Pretzel Logic, which I believe was the first Steely Dan record that I ever owned, to me, that is when you're really getting into good stuff here. I'm going to show that gatefold. Yeah, Pretzel Logic, probably my second favorite Steely Dan record. It actually probably goes 3, 2, 1 of the 3 records that I have here, if I were to guess. But yeah, I think at this point they have really settled into being a studio project, and they have a lot of really professional sounding studio musicians, and they have this intent and attention to detail with the production that is only going to get more and more pronounced over the years. In the case of some records, maybe not so much for better as for worse. I'm speaking about Gaucho there, which I still think is a fundamentally very good album, but I think it's a little bit overwrought. But Ricky, Don't Lose That Number, Night by Night, any major dude will tell you. I like Parker's Band, title track, Charlie Freak. It's smooth. It's smooth as hell. And in a way, I think it's on some levels, they almost get a little bit more pep in their step with the next couple of records before they go all the way smooth with Asia. Side note, kind of like the texture of this vinyl. It's it kind of fits. It has a nice sheen to it. It's a very clean cover, I suppose. Yeah, your mileage may vary on Asia. I know this is kind of a polarizing record, in the sense of if you like Steely Dan, this might be your favorite Steely Dan album. It might not. If you don't like Steely Dan, you are almost certainly going to hate this record, because this is the album that kind of personifies a lot of the negative stuff that people will say about Steely Dan, the negative stereotyping, about how their songs just kind of like noodle around. They're very cold, very icy. I don't get the criticism about like they don't have like feel or soul. I think it's white soul for sure. Maybe you could argue plastic soul, but like something like Deacon Blues and Peg, man, I think those are solid damn tracks. And really the whole record is. I think picking a favorite track, it probably is Peg, because I'm a sucker for Michael McDonald, as I've said before in this series, but there's a lot of good stuff there. All right, so now let's go on to Cat Stevens, and there's going to be quite a few of these. Cat Stevens is an artist who has left kind of an indelible impact on me. I got into his music my freshman year of college. He's one of the artists that has stuck with me the most from that era, or who I got into from that era. And there's something about his music. Let's start off with this one. Monobone Yakin, which is a pseudonym for his penis, which is kind of odd. When you consider the type of music that Cat Stevens is associated with. If you've heard a Cat Stevens record, you know it is very like sweet, to the point where some would probably call it sickly sweet. There's a lot of themes of like childhood and innocence and peace and that sort of thing, which is interesting because his own kind of personal life was very kind of conflicted, and it wasn't until close to the end of the 70s, I think it was, late 70s or maybe into the 80s, when he decided to get out of the pop music industry, converted to Islam, and then really began kind of living what his music represented, I suppose. But, so again, kind of what I'm trying to say is that euphemism feels a little bit out of character when you take into consideration all that. But this record, I think in particular, has kind of an edge to it that I think is interesting. There's some lovely tracks. I mean, Lady Darbanville is a beautiful song. I love it very much. Maybe You're Right is nice. I Think I See the Light. Kathmandu, Lily White. It's a strong record. And it's his third studio album. And it was his first after he had a illness that incapacitated him and nearly killed him, that grounded him a lot more, I think. And so it's a much more mature record in some ways than his first couple of albums. Again, penis analogy aside, obviously. But now we get to the phenomenal Tea for the Tillerman from 1970. It was the first Cat Stevens record that I heard. I got into it, actually. This would have been about May of 2017. And I remember this distinctly. I got into it because I went to the theater and saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It wasn't opening night, I don't think, but I think it might have been opening weekend. Weekend after, if not. I mean, it was a packed theater. It was a very loud theater. And obviously, at the end of that movie, if you've seen it, they play the song Father and Son during a funeral scene for one of the characters. And I really liked the movie. I'm not a Marvel fan. I'm not like an enthusiast. I'm nothing against them, but I don't follow the movies really. But I really liked that movie, and I thought it had a good and sweet theme to it. And listening to that song, it's a very kind of emotionally climactic moment. I had the motivation to explore this full record, I think the next day or within the next week or so. And immediately it was like, I love this. I love the sound of this so much. It's very much like it kind of feels like watching a life story play out in some ways. Just in terms of, there's a lot of themes of kind of breaking away and growth and finding yourself. um, and like existential crises in some ways. Um, Where Do the Children Play? Fantastic song, really dynamic song. And again, you hear kind of the more aggressive and angry side of Steven's voice there. He gets into it a lot. I mean, even with the stuff like Wild World, which is very like precious, he definitely has a gravel that he can dig into at points. Into White is lovely. It's a gorgeous song. As I say, father and son. Even the stuff like But I Might Die Tonight or Longer Boats, which is a song about aliens or something like that. Like, it all works because it's just such a nice and pleasant aesthetic that he puts out there. I mean, in the album cover, I mean, maybe ignore the eyes of the kid here because those are kind of creepy, but it's a very pleasant aesthetic, isn't it? And yeah, I adore it. It was one of my favorite albums, if not my favorite album for a very long time because of the personal significance that it had. And because of that, I own like a few different copies of it. Here's another copy. I also have one that's framed currently as well. Next, I'm going to adjust this here a little bit. There we go. Teaser in the Firecat, the follow-up record. Show the gatefold of that one a little bit. Some people prefer Teaser in the Firecat, and I wouldn't begrudge them for it. It's, you know, it doesn't have the personal connection for me that Tea for the Tillerman does, which is why I wouldn't rate it quite as highly. But I can't deny the songwriting in here is fantastic and arguably is maybe even better than Tea for the Tillerman. I think The Wind is fantastic. I just heard it in the film The Holdovers recently, which I love that film. And so it's kind of full circle, right? It's like, okay, Cat Stevens has kind of come back into my life a little bit thanks to the cinema. Ruby Love, If I Laugh, How Can I Tell You? Bitter Blue is great. And of course, like the most famous ones, Morning is Broken, Moon Shadow, and Peace Train. It's a fantastic album that I think is a little bit less ambitious than Tea for the Tillerman is, because I feel like Tillerman is trying to tell a story on some level, or is trying to connect with some deeper theme. And Teaser really isn't doing that. It's just a collection of really strong songs. And it, to me, though, both of those records rank among the very best folk albums of the 70s, if not of all time. And I will not hear otherwise. So then we get to Catch Bullet 4. I have a lot of Stevens' other records, although I'll be honest, like immediately after Tillerman and Firecat, I lose interest, which is probably not fair. And admittedly, it has been a few years since I've listened to these, but Catch Bullet 4, I think to me is probably the best record apart from the first two. No, that's not true. I'd probably put Mona Bone Yakin above it as well. Yeah, this one has 18th Avenue on it, I think. Right? Yes, it has 18th Avenue, and I like that song. But for the most part, I think this one, you know, it has a lot of the same qualities. It's produced by the same person, Paul Samwell Smith, and you have to give him a lot of credit for that. But it is not, to me, up to his usual standards. I do not remember much at all about Buddha and the Chocolate Box. I remember liking Sun C79. Again, one of his more kind of aggressive songs. I also like having this version because it has like the hype sticker here that you can kind of see. Includes the single Oh Very Young, which I honestly don't remember how it goes. So, but oh well. This one I think people seem to like, though, generally as well. Might even prefer it a little bit to Catch Bullet 4 in some people's eyes. We then skip to, Is It So, right? Yeah. Is It So? Is It So is probably the worst record that he released, at least under the name Cat Stevens. I think, I don't know what he's doing here. I think there's more. He's experimenting with different sonic palettes at this point, which I think is interesting. Like a record that I kind of forgot that I don't even own on vinyl, but Foreigner. Foreigner is interesting because there's a whole like Foreigner suite that he's trying to do there, and I think it's an ambitious project, even if it doesn't stick the landing as well as I hope. But starting with Numbers, and then it's really augmented with Is It So. He's just going in some interesting directions that I don't think serve his songwriting very well. And yeah, I remember not liking Sweet Jamaica and Was Dog a Donut. It's been a few years since I've heard it, but I mean, the title alone, Was Dog a Donut, I think is a testament to the literary musical value of that record, I suppose. Back to Earth. This is his last record under the Cat Stevens moniker. And this one is not rated very highly. It is a return to more kind of adult contemporary sounds. But I think that's what suits him the best. And so I like the sound of it for the most part, even if the songs are not quite as good. I like Daytime and I like Last Love Song quite a bit off of this record. And then he disappears for a while and we don't hear much of anything from him. He then comes back as Yusuf Islam and initially releases a lot of like kind of spoken word records and, records that are connected to the religion and are meant to kind of share that aspect of him. I have not heard more than like samples from any of these records, so I can't comment on them. I know at some point, though, he made the pivot back to releasing kind of pop music and he's released a few albums since then. I do have a couple of them on vinyl. This one, Tell 'Em I'm Gone from 2014, I think. Tell 'Em I'm Gone. This is actually a different cover from the CD issue of it. This is a vinyl only cover, I believe. This one is him actually digging into like bluesier and more rock sounds. I mean, his voice his voice is like gruff, but it's still soft. So, we're not digging in here in a way that like someone like Howlin' Wolf would, but I think he does. It's nice to hear him explore this direction, and I think you hear him do it on Road Singer a little bit as well from this era. So I do like that. And then you have The Laughing Apple from 2017. So he actually released this just a few months after I got into his music properly. And The Laughing Apple is interesting because it very much returns to the more precious side of his songwriting. A few of these songs were released on his second record, particularly. I think it's just New Masters that these come off of. So he re-records them with this very like soft spoken acoustic sense, and it really, like, especially when you look at like the cover here, I mean, it feels like a children's album. It's borderline what it is, but it's very pleasant. And I can't complain with it. And I'm pretty sure, I got this record for like $8, which is a steal in my mind for a 2 LP set from the late 2010s. For the record, I do not have Tea for the Tillerman 2. Tea for the Tillerman 2 I thought was a mess. I appreciate the ambition that he showed in trying to reinterpret those songs. I just don't think it stuck the landing one bit. So now we're going to get to Sufjan Stevens. Sufjan Stevens is such an interesting artist to me. And I wish that I had more records of his to show. The truth is I do not have very many. But I think he releases some of the most interesting and creative, unique folk records of this era of the last, 25 years at this point. And the guy has been through so much on top of that too. It's his life story and some of the losses that he has suffered have definitely come to define his music to some level, although not entirely. So there are two records that I have on vinyl of his. The first one is Illinois from '05, I believe. Yep, '05. Illinois, to me, I wonder if that car horn picked up. We'll see. Illinois, to me, I think is his most ambitious musical project that like completely sticks the landing for me. His whole States project, which I understand it lasted a total of 2 states before it disappeared. There's a very cinematic quality to it. It's amazing that a style of music and a musical approach can feel so soft-spoken and yet so epic and ambitious simultaneously. It's a very interesting kind of quandary, but I have a lot of respect for it. And I think this album is fantastic. I think it takes a lot of different twists and turns. I am particularly fond of Come On Feel the Illinois, Jacksonville, and definitely Casimir Pulaski Day. That is a gut-wrenching track and absolutely looks ahead to what he's going to be doing on some of his more, shall we say, emo records. I really want to get The Age of Odds on vinyl. I don't have that one yet, but that one is definitely a favorite. But I do own this, which is my favorite Sufjan record, a record that I also got into in 2017, and that is Carrie and Lowell. Carrie and Lowell is a devastating album. I talked about Mount Erie's A Crow Looked at Me in a previous video. And that one is like grief in its rawest form. Just very blunt, not trying to make it artsy in any way. And this is like a step above that in the sense of it's clearly like artistic, I suppose. Like it is expressive and intentional in its expressiveness in a way that I don't think Phil Elverum could have mustered with the Mount Erie record because of like how raw his emotions were. This feels like Sufjan at least has had enough time to process these emotions to really throw in some like interesting lyrical choices, these interesting imagery. Like he's being intentional about it. He is making a record. Like that is his intention. Whereas Phil Elverum's, I feel like, is more of a, I'm going to throw my thoughts and my feelings onto a stack of vinyl, essentially. It's 2 different ways, maybe even 2 different stages of processing grief. If you're not familiar, Sufjan, this is about Sufjan's mother who passed away, who he had a very complicated relationship with. And just all the themes about like spirituality, about grief, about how to process that, about not being able to process that and feeling like you're at the end of your rope, like The Only Thing, which has imagery of suicides, of suicide attempts in it, stuff like No Shade in the Shadow of the Cross, that kind of ending section of the record where there's a little bit of a sense of renewal because he's trying to find faith in spirituality. And that's really what the song The Only Thing represents. It's the turning point of the record because you have 4th of July, which is the deathbed scene, him and his mother having that last conversation. And The Only Thing is like his first moment of processing after the fact. Like, what do I do? How do I react to this? But then there's a sense of hope at the end of that song that then I think relays itself into the remainder of the record. It's stunning. It is soft. It's, it's not high fidelity. I mean, it sounds like it was recorded on an iPhone, and some of it I'm pretty sure was. But goddamn, it is powerful. It's one of my favorite folk records of all time, and I adore it greatly. Okay. Next up, an artist who I want to explore a little bit more of, but I know that this record is phenomenal, and that is Laura Stevenson, The Big Freeze. Laura was a favorite of the website SputnikMusic.com, probably still is. That's where I remember hearing about her stuff first. And this was, I think, the record that people were hyping up the most when it came out. And so I listened to this, and I've listened, I think, to a couple of her others. And yeah, there's a, I don't know, it's a really cool, like, indie folk rock aesthetic that she has. I really like Low Slow on this record, probably my favorite. And yeah, it's one that I have on the docket to revisit soon enough. Because I'm a big fan of the sound of it. All right. Next up, I have one Stephen Stills record, and that is the debut from 1970. That said, I'm pretty sure I only got this because it was cheap. I'm not actually a big fan of the Stephen Stills debut, enough to where I've just never really bothered listening to any of his other stuff. It sounds a lot to me like it's kind of like a predecessor to what Ringo Starr would do on his Ringo record from 73, where it's very much an I get by with a little help from my friends type of thing. I mean, when you're casually throwing in like Jimi Hendrix on a record, and Eric Clapton on back-to-back songs, you're getting carried by your guest stars. And I don't remember Hendrix actually being a super prominent presence in the track that he appears on either. Like, I don't know that he saved it from being kind of irrelevant. It's been a while since I've heard it, but Stills admittedly has been the Crosby, Stills, and Nash member that I have the least interest in really exploring. Even like Graham Nash, I really like Songs for Beginners, so he has that going for him. All right, next up, Sting. I have a few Sting records to talk about. I love Sting's solo. We talked about the Police. I really like the Police. I think they have a lot of really good albums, but boy, Sting's solo, at least some of it, is my shit. Let's start with The Dream of the Blue Turtles. Oop, Jesus. The Dream of the Blue Turtles from 85, I want to say. It's interesting. I think Sting felt like he had a point to prove after he left the Police. I think there was a lot of... his image was already not, like, super great. I think people already had a feeling that he was kind of an arrogant prick, which, to be fair, by all accounts, he kind of is. But Dream of the Blue Turtles is him kind of leaning into that a little bit. This is sophistopop in every sense of the word. I think it is Sting trying to reclaim his identity from being just like the guy from the Police. I think part of the reason for that is the fact that he literally re-records a Police song here in Shadows in the Rain. I like the take on it here, but I think if you can get past the bitterness, which I think pervades this record, I think there's a lot of really great songwriting on here. If You Love Somebody, Set Them Free. Russians is really haunting. We Work the Black Scene. I like Consider Me Gone a lot. Moon Over Bourbon Street. It's a strong record, and I really like it. I think the problem is, I think he bested it with the next three albums that followed it. I love these next three records, like, to death. After that, I'm totally meh on Sting's solo career. I think he's got some decent stuff, but after 10 Summoner's Tales, I check out for the most part. Nothing Like the Sun from 87, I believe. Yeah. This record is inspired in part and is actually dedicated to his mother, who passed away while it was being made. And because of that, there's a few songs that deal very directly with grief. I think Sting is trying a little bit less hard on this record. Yes, it is still sophistopop, if you will. But I don't think... it doesn't feel as insecure. I feel like Sting has kind of settled down a bit and is just comfortable writing really strong music. The actual title, Nothing Like the Sun, coming from a Shakespeare sonnet. Sister Moon is, the track that has that line. He uses a lot of English literature in his imagery. Um, and yeah, it's rock solid, man. It's rock solid. Only thing I have to say about it is I am not crazy about Rocksteady. It's the Noah's Ark song. It's a little bit of a joke track. Uh, but stuff like We'll Be Together, I think, is really upbeat. I think the whole first side of the album is really strong. Um, Fragile is fantastic. Sister Moon, the Little Wing cover. But maybe my favorite song on here is They Dance Alone. I think that's a really powerful song. I love the spoken word bit in the middle. It's, again, it's Sophistopop, and I'm not going to try to compare it to something like Sade, because I don't know if I could genuinely say whether or not I prefer this to some of Sade's best, because I think Sade's best is incredible. But I think that record deserves a lot of love, a lot of appreciation. And so do these next two, which I like both of these more. And I go back and forth about whether or not I prefer these, like which one I prefer of these two. At the moment, I think I would probably put this one as my, I don't know. I really don't know. I think maybe I'd put this as number 2 for now. But The Soul Cages is a fantastic record. This one is dedicated to his dad. I kind of feel like it's kind of unfortunate. It's obviously very sad and unfortunate that he lost both of his parents within a few years of each other. I think it's admittedly kind of unfortunate that his mother got like a couple of songs and a dedication on his last record, and his dad basically gets a whole album that it's about him. But, you know, to each their own, right? You know, the story of this would end up inspiring a Broadway musical that he would write a few, you know, like a decade or so later, called The Last Ship. And there's a lot of kind of shipping and mariner themes here. A lot of kind of English folk instrumentation that really conjures up that vibe. And, you know, there's beautiful tracks on here, like Why Should I Cry for You, When the Angels Fall. But there's a lot of kind of upbeat tracks that have a little bit of a groove to them. All This Time is phenomenal. Terrific driving song. Mad About You, I really love the various different like string instruments that are kind of, again, evoking that seaside town imagery. The title track is really cool, a little kind of hard rock edge to it. And then the song that I'm pretty sure is the lowest rated if you were to go on something like Rate Your Music to check track ratings, Jeremiah Blues Part 1. What the fuck? Like why are people hating on this song? It is so, like, the instrumental playing on that song is so freaking strong. It's so good. You know, Sting surrounded himself with a lot of phenomenal players, a lot of absolutely terrific players. Manu Katché is the name of the drummer, who is remarkable. I've heard him play on a number of records, and the groove there is just phenomenal. Sting's bass playing is great. Like, let's give Sting all the praise in the world for being a great bass player. Okay. 10 Summoner's Tales. This is probably my number 1 as we sit right now, although some days it is number 2 to Soul Cages. I just think, to me, adult contemporary pop doesn't get any better than this. It is so well recorded. The songwriting to me is so strong. Like, If I Ever Lose My Faith in You, I think is like if I'm going to people with examples of what makes good pop songwriting and how to really structure a pop song, If I Ever Lose My Faith in You is like one of my go-to examples. I'd say that's how you do it right there. The melodies, the builds into the choruses, the bridge, the ending, just the sound of it, and the vocals staying, you know, his vocal tone is kind of an acquired taste. I understand that, but I think him as a singer, oh, chef's kiss. Really great. And yeah, I think every song on here, even the stuff like Heavy Cloud, No Rain, I think is really good. And then stuff like Fields of Gold, 7 Days, It's Probably Me, Shape of My Heart. St. Augustine in Hell is kind of cool. I love the kind of 7/4 groove that track has. It's just, so good. It's so well done. And I wish people gave that record more of a chance, but I think Sting has this kind of vibe about him that throws people off, which is understandable, but I don't know. Give it a chance. Okay, this is a record that I'm almost embarrassed to say I've never heard all the way through. Although I've heard some of the songs, obviously. But Supertramp, Breakfast in America. I have not heard this record yet. I will be very transparent about that. I got this as part of another collection. I know some people really love Supertramp. A lot of people really love Supertramp. Some people are not super huge on them. I understand that. I will be the first person to say that I am not crazy about the hits that I've heard, but I've also really only exposed myself to them in a classic rock radio setting and not intentionally listened to them. So at some point I'll get around to listening to that record, and I'm sure my opinions will change. Okay, we are at the last artist of the S's, and I think people probably guessed that I would have some Taylor Swift records to talk about based off of some other things that I've said in other videos. I did an entire video collaboration on the channel Music Meltdown where I ranked and rated the Taylor Swift albums, so you can go there if you want like my full thoughts, my full in-depth observations on Taylor Swift's career. But I will talk about the records that I have, and I actually own quite a few, although I'm not complete. Why am I not complete? Because a lot of Taylor records are very expensive. Her first few albums, the original releases on Big Machine Records, could absolutely run you $50, $60. And the re-releases are not, they're not cheap either. They're definitely not cheap, although I do own one of them. So, with that said, the first record that I own is 2012's Red. This, I think, was actually a reissue that they did around the time that the Taylor's version of Red came out, which makes sense. Of course, they're going to try to reissue that stuff to kind of capitalize on that, or reprint it, I should say. Yeah, I mean, Red is, I think, in a lot of ways, her most significant record as far as what it means for her overall career. It's actually not one of my favorites. Which doesn't say much because I think it's phenomenal. But admittedly, I think the dubstep-inspired production of songs like I Knew You Were Trouble, We're Never Ever Getting Back Together has not aged super well, but I think the sentiments and the snappiness of the hook writing on them has. And then you have everything else, like State of Grace, the title track. You know, The Last Time Is Good. Of course, All Too Well, right? You know, so much I think has aged well about this record that I can forgive the stuff that feels like it is very rooted in 2012 and that whole aesthetic. Really great. All right, 1989. What can you say? I think this is maybe the best pop album of the 2010s. It definitely has some good competition that's fighting it for that title. But boy, a full record with Max Martin minus a couple of songs was such, it was a risky move. Not, I think the success of the songs in Red proved that she could probably make it work, but I don't think people expected how good this was going to be. I think this is some of the cleanest sounding production on any pop record that you will hear. I think the songwriting, again, she makes the pivot so effectively, it's kind of unbelievable. This is definitely not the same approach to lyrical writing for the most part that she has done in her other albums. It is very concise. And, I think stuff like Shake It Off and Bad Blood, your mileage may vary about how much you kind of tolerate those songs. They're definitely not my favorites of hers, but I do like them enough. But Blank Space and Style, I mean, that is how you craft a pop song right there. Those two songs. I really like I Wish You Would has a very aggressive production to it that I really like. I like Wildest Dreams, obviously. This Love, I think, is great. The last track that she did with Nathan Chapman on the boards. I Know Places and Clean, which might be my favorite song on the record with Imogen Heap at the end, is just it's a remarkable album. I mean, every time I listen to it, it leaves me speechless, kind of. like how good it is, and I try to like dissect the little like production sounds, the little like kind of faint snare drum sound on stuff like Style, I think. Um, just the little things that drive these songs forward, these little intricacies that you can just pick up on with each new listen. And it's just, as kind of a production geek myself, it makes me nerd out. So it's really well done. And I have to say, I was very disappointed by the Taylor's version remake of it. I probably shouldn't have set my expectations too high, but I definitely was not keen on the way that turned out. Just the balances were off for the most part. It felt a little bit, dare I say it, phoned in. The only time I've really been disappointed by a Taylor Swift re-release so far. Reputation. This is actually kind of a difficult record to find for a reasonable price too. I think I paid like $35 for this, but you could easily pay like $50 for it. It's an unfairly maligned record for the most part. I think it has a lot of the same strengths as 1989. I just don't think the production is quite. It's intentionally a bit darker, a bit more kind of clustered, and I don't think the songs here match what 1989 has. Which how could it? But I think, again, it's an important record for her own artistic development, and I think if you can tolerate the occasionally like borderline unlistenable like bass production, especially where it just kind of sounds like it's farbling and like farting and warbling or what have you. There's some good stuff here, and there's actually some fantastic stuff on here. So I really like Reputation. I didn't like it at first. I was one of the people who criticized Look What You Made Me Do, and I still don't really think that much of that song. But oh god, the rest of it is, there's a lot to like. Okay. Lover from 2019. I think this was the first Taylor Swift record that I listened to. It was either this or 1989 that I explored for the first time, and that's because I watched the Miss Americana documentary on Netflix back in early 2020. And yeah, Lover is an album that I think has grown off of me a little bit just because it is a little bit all over the place. But it does just have this overall sense of kind of freedom. It's a lot more peaceful than Reputation is, and I think that's welcome. And I think she is trying to do a lot here, which is, it's an ambitious album. The best stuff, I think, to me, are the two singles, Cruel Summer and Lover. I think both of those songs are top 5, maybe, Taylor Swift songs ever. And there's plenty of other stuff to like. I'm not crazy about The Man, I suppose. It is what it is. I like the sentiment of it, but I think the song as it is, in and of itself, I could take or leave. But the Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince, Paper Rings, Cornelia Street, Death by a Thousand Cuts, that whole stretch I think is remarkable, and I really love False God too. Daylight is great as well. Only complete miss for me, I think, is the Panic at the Disco collaboration. Or the Brendan Urie collaboration. Not a fan of that one at all. Okay. Folklore. This is the Target edition of it. I do have the another copy of it with the kind of primary album artwork with her in the trees. That's actually framed on my wall. I was floored by Folklore when I heard it for the first time. And to this day, I still really think it's kind of a remarkable record. And next to Red might be her most important, just in terms of, like, she always had the commercial acclaim. That was always kind of in her back pocket. And she's always had critical acclaim to some degree. But I think Folklore is where she finally won the praise of the critics, just kind of overall. And she's never really looked back since. I think this is the turning point into her becoming the monolith of pop culture that she is right now. And yeah, I mean, it's not, like, from a songwriting standpoint, it's not that far removed from what Lover is trying to do, certainly at points. But I think working with Aaron Dessner, I think Dessner brings out a side of Taylor Swift that you don't see any other producer bring out. And that's the side that I generally like the most. And maybe that's because I relate to the National's songwriting style a bit more and that sonic approach. But man, I love what she's doing on this record. I think every song is excellent, with stuff like Cardigan, Exile, Mirrorball, Seven, Illicit Affairs, Mad Woman. Mad Woman was one that like didn't jump out to me at first, but lately Mad Woman has been maybe my favorite song on their record. I think that is a towering achievement of production and just really angry songwriting. It's interesting to hear her genuinely angry songwriting come out. It's very unique, I think. Then we get to Evermore, which I've already talked about in another video. It is probably my favorite Taylor Swift album still, although 1989, every time I listen to it, is like, hey, look, don't forget about me. But Evermore, Folklore again is like a Dessner and Jack Antonoff kind of handing off different songs. They kind of own a portion of that record apiece. This is very much Dessner's show, and he brings out the side of Taylor Swift that I think is really interesting. I think her songwriting has never been better than it is on this record. I think her lyrics have never been better. And I love this mixture of the folk with like even some of the country roots at times. Something like Dorothea, or Nobody, No Crime. I think both are fantastic. I'm very partial to 'Tis the Damn Season, and the guitar sounds on that one. Tolerate It is heartbreaking. Coney Island, of course. I think her voice works pretty damn well with Aaron Dessner's. But Cowboy Like Me is the one that has stood out to me the most lately. I think that has such a hell of a groove to it. You have Justin Vernon from Bon Iver playing the drums on it. Marcus Mumford laying down those backing vocals, and he plays that song live too. I mean, he's fucking giddy about that song and thinks it's amazing, which is fun. And then the bonus track, Right Where You Left Me, is a remarkable song. Okay, the one Taylor's version that I do own, which I also think is the best one, is Red, Taylor's version. To me, this just has, I think, I don't know if it's the best, like, technical re-recording of the songs. Like, I would probably give that to Fearless if I had to think about it. And I think maybe that's just because of, like, I don't think the songs, again, your dubstep tracks, like I Knew You Were Trouble, I don't think they hold up super well to the re-recordings. But where this album really wins is, I think, a lot of, like, the slower songs and the more emotional ones. I think her voice brings out a lot in them now that it's, aged about 10 years. And then the bonus tracks. The bonus tracks, I think, are the best that she has ever put out on any Taylor's version release. Highlights being Nothing New, featuring Phoebe Bridgers. I Like Message in a Bottle. I Bet You Think About Me with Chris Stapleton. And then, of course, the 10-minute version of All Too Well, which I think is fascinating just on the fact that it exists, I think is fascinating. And the fact that it takes so many different directions, I think is really cool as well. And then we end this video with Midnights, a record that I did not like very much upon first listen, but grew on me a ton in reasonably short order. I think it has grown off of me a little bit since I made that collaboration video on the Music Meltdown channel. I think it has grown off me a tiny bit, but that might be more because other albums have grown on me. I think this is still a really well-produced record. I'm still absolutely a fan of Jack Antonoff's sound, even though I know he gets a bad rap among a lot of diehard music fans. I think he's a very adaptable, creative partner, and I think that is to his benefit. And yeah, I think, her kind of diving headfirst into the pop realm again is really interesting to me, because I think she transforms her approach a bit here. And she has become a more interesting lyric writer since, the days of Lover. And she's trying a lot more different things. Now, stuff like the 30 Rock reference or whatever it is on Anti-Hero, you know, that misses the mark in the eyes of a lot of people. I understand that, but stuff like You're on Your Own, Kid, Bejeweled, Karma, Mastermind, maybe. I don't know. I think there's a lot of different things that she's trying out that I think are really effective. My favorite song on here is probably Karma. I just think that is such an ebullient track, in every conceivable way, and just one of the best hooks that she's written. It's not quite Cruel Summer levels of like satisfying to me, but it's damn close. All right, so that does it. We have gone through that collection of artists, and we're heading towards kind of the home stretch here. So there probably will only be 2 or like 3 more videos in this set. And then I will make another video or 2 recapping records that I have acquired since starting this video series all those many months ago. So thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more videos, reviews, collections, etc. Will be coming your way. Make sure to hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.